In this video on methods, I am going to review arrays. So we'll do methods with an array. I'm going to create a new public static method, and this time this method is going to return an integer array. So remember, my return statement is what I'm giving back, and this method is going to be called feedback, and it is going to have just one parameter that's an array. So here I have a method that is a public static method. It returns an integer array, and it needs an integer array. And inside this method, I'm going to have a for loop. And this for loop, the counter is I equals 0. It's going to be I is less than a dot length. So basically, what this for loop is going to do is cycle through the entire array, I plus plus, and the for loop is going to all it's going to do is go through the entire array. It says look at every element, and it's going to add 1 to every element. Now that's going to be my entire for loop. Now that's my entire for loop. Just as a reminder, I don't really have to have the brackets here, because all it is just the next line that's going to happen. Now after it cycles through everything and it adds 1 to every element in the array, it's then going to return the array. So it will return the array. So there's my first method, very basic method, but it takes in an array, it spits out an array, and all it does is add 1 to all the elements in the array. I'm going to create another public static method that will also return an integer array, and I will call it yThis, and it also needs an array to work. Its one parameter is an array. This method will be a little bit more complex. It's going to have an integer variable inside of it. This is a local variable called the num, and it's going to be set equal to b.length. B is the array that it gets sent. It's the parameter. So it's going to do b.length divided by 2. Now I put divided by 2 in there as a reminder that a lot of times, if b.length is an odd number, and you do odd divided by 2, you have to be careful, because integer divided by integer can give you some goofy math answers. We'll review that too. So I'm going to put a for loop in this one, and I'm going to cycle through this array, and I is less than or equal to the num. So I'm going to make this one a little tricky, because the num is kind of a changing number that I have to track depending on what parameter I pass this method. And this for loop is going to do some things. I'm going to review how to swap two things in an array. So I'm going to have int hold, which is kind of just my temporary holder, and it's going to hold whatever's in array B index I. And what I'm going to do then is, once I have that array B index I stored in memory somewhere, I'm going to overwrite it. So B the num, I'm going to overwrite it with the num. Right, and after I overwrite it, then I'm going to overwrite b the num. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually just swapping whatever's in index I and whatever's in index the num. That's really what these 3 lines of code do, is swap 2 array elements. Array index I and array index the num. It swaps them. Alright, we gotta correct that. There we go. Now, after I'm done swapping, I'm going to return the array back. All is good. Now I'm going to run down to my main method, public static void main, which is a shortcut here for me, and I'm going to create an array that I can work with here in this class. I'll call it my array equals, and my array is going to just be 2, 4, 6, 8, 1. We'll just make sure we don't just have a super duper pattern there, so you can see that things change a little bit. And I create the array, and I'm going to send that array as a parameter. Before I do that, I'm actually going to create a new array. I'm going to call this new array 1. New array 1. And this I'm going to set it equal to. I'm not going to just declare it or initialize it right now with a set of numbers, or I'm not going to use an initializer list like I did for my array. I'm actually going to have one of my methods create an array here. So I'm going to call the feedback method. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it the why this method return. And the why this method, I'm going to send it my array. So there, I've added quite a bit all there in that one line. But remember, this is like functions in mathematics. We work from the inside out. So we're going to find my array. Okay, so my array, as we look through this, and maybe as I just comment a little bit, my array is this array that I created, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1. That's my array. Okay, now, my array gets passed to the why this method. Okay, so it gets passed to the why this method. So after the why this method runs, okay, my 24681 changes. What does the why this method do? Well, the why this method calculates the num. And how long is this? This list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 long. So the num is 5 divided by 2, which, be careful, is actually 2 in this case, because 5 divided by 2 is really 2.5, but they're two integer values, so we drop the decimal. It's 2. And so this is just going to run for I equals 0, 1, and 2. So this runs 0, 1, and 2 here if I want to track that I equals 0, 1, 2. Okay, and it runs and it's going to swap. So it's going to swap the element 0 with the element 2, because the num is 2. So it swaps the element 0 with the element 2. That's what this does. And then it goes back through the for loop and it says, hey, I is now 1. So it swaps element 1, index 1 with index 2. And then it comes up here and it says 2. It says, let's swap element 2 with element 2. Well, that doesn't do much because it's the same element. And it just does some array swapping. So you could do some work there by hand, and we'll use Java here to solve it for us. I'm going to create a for loop just to run through and print out that array. And so I'm going to do int elements for every element in my new array 1. What I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to print, I'm going to print the element. So I'm using my enhanced for loop for each loop here. And I'm just going to print out the element and put some spaces between them, not an enter after every one. And that's what I'm going to do there. And I'll print that array list out. We'll run this thing and see what we've got for a result. And you could do the same too here. But that array, which was 24681, has had the why this. It's had some swapping done to it. And then once it has some swapping done to it, it passes that array to the feedback. And remember what feedback does up top is it adds 1 to all of the elements in the array. This method up here adds 1 to all the elements. Which explains the reason why when you look at my array, my new array at the bottom, if you were to take all of these numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, and if you were to add 1 to all of those numbers, you see those down here in my result. But they're moved around, they're swapped around a little bit because of what the why this method has done.